Welcome to COVID and Climate Change Correlations, a weekly video podcast where I, Daniel Sanderson, engage in a stimulating conversation with post-Keynesian economist Steve Keen.
Well, good evening. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
No, not too bad. I had a bit of a panic for a while there because we had today was declared cat washing day. So 3 cats are now finding themselves being shampooed. Of course, they're thoroughly enjoying the experience and don't need to have their claws restrained at all. So that was that happened 20 minutes before the call came, and then I found just the usual fun. I couldn't get this to work in either Chrome or Edge. So I've gone across to Firefox, which I had to install. So basically, usual. What are the 2 acronyms? Snafu and what's the other one? And Fubar. Usual story.
Well, I think it just proves that everything moves to entropy, isn't that right, Steve?
Yeah, that seems to be the way of the future, the way of the present, isn't it? At the moment. You've seen the rainstorm, the floods in Australia.
Oh yeah, I saw some I saw a really nice article that you wrote about that as a huge anomaly, and that's rather concerning from a climate change front. But of course, it's really difficult to get any airtime on climate change these days.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get airtime after it happens rather than before, which is it seems to be humanity's way. We respond to crises after they blow up in our face. We ignore all the signs they're approaching beforehand. So yet again, and with the biggest crisis we've ever faced, that's what's happening right now. And I think the wake-up calls are starting to happen. I realize I'm going to be, I'm running for election in Australia, and one of the things that Conservatives are saying, the ones in power, of course, trust us. We can handle crises. No, you can't. No. You had fires in 2019, pestilence in 2020 to 22. Now you've got floods in 2022. Let's just get rid of you before the locusts turn up.
Yeah, exactly. It gets all biblical on us. But isn't the idea of the conservative solution? And I have conservative sensibilities. I honestly do. We'll explore those a little bit. But I mean, the answer is not just better economy, right? I mean, is this the foundation of the conservative? Like, if we
fundamentally, that's what they say. You can trust us to manage the economy, and what they mean by that, you can trust us to attempt to run a surplus, which is the exact opposite of managing the economy well. But that's what the conservative mindset believes, and economists are responsible for it. And so the very fact that they run down public services, which means then when you have a calamity like the floods, you don't have the state emergency service or the national emergency service that's able to cope with it. And they say, that's good management. No, it's bloody not. It's rather than saying we're saving money for the future, what they're doing, they're not creating money for the present and the future. And that's a major part of why the infrastructure simply wasn't able to cope with the disaster.
Yeah. So
hang on. Actually, cat rescue is still in place. She's trapped in here. You can come and get her. My wife is getting our 3rd cat for the washing experience. So pardon her going in the background.
So the cat knows to hide, I guess, eh?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, one of them was hiding beneath the couch. I had to drag him out from underneath the couch. And this one she's hiding in a favourite sleeping position, but she knows she's about to get almost drowned. It's serious. Hey, come out. We'll bring the cat around. Here's that's Nana.
Shower.
It's protesting. So, Steve, I don't. They do clean themselves a little bit, but how do your cats get so dirty that they need to have showers?
It's not that they get so dirty. I've got a wife who's so obsessed with them being clean.
Oh, okay, all right. Yes.
Okay.
Are they? It's not like anybody's watching. Are they going? Do they go outside and they? Or are they indoor cats only?
They're animals. They play, they also go outside. I mean, it's the great trouble, of course, the cats are fabulous predators. So we've lost all the geckos that used to fight the mosquitoes. Now we've got far more mosquitoes as pets than we have cats. Just what you need. And then she graduated to catching birds now, Of course, sparrows are fair game for a cat her size, so we've had a couple of sparrows end up in our bed.
Quite
What can you
amazing
do?
hunters, aren't they? Like I
Hunters.
had
That's
I had
their
an
nature.
I had an indoor cat, and no, I mean we had a cat and treated it like an indoor cat, and it actually I think it did better at a later point in its life when it, I guess it increased its cat happiness when we actually let it out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we went outside.
they're hunters. The way they play with each other is the way hunters play. And one of the little thought processes I have is what would have happened if a pure predator had evolved as the intelligent species on this planet rather than us. Okay, and the intriguing thing about a pure predator is they can't eat the grass. Okay, so the pure predator can eat the prey. But if they eat the prey run out, and they can't then go over and eat the prey's food as well, which we can do. So we've got to, in fact, I might even try modeling that in Minsky as a little exercise, because fundamentally with the predator-prey system, when you start driving your prey down to zero, then you go to zero as well, and then the prey recover and you come back up again and so on. But it's because we're omnivores, we can eat both what we eat. We hunt animals, but we also eat what the animals themselves can eat, not grass, but vegetables, etc., etc. Maybe that's one reason why we face a total calamity, because we haven't had an earlier constraint on running out of the animals to hunt on. Pardon me. Another part of being in a rented accommodation in a sort of second, 2.5 rather than third world country. We just had the light fixed, and it fixed isn't all that well. So I've got to tell the landlord, who's a good mate, that we need to get the repair repaired.
Okay. So. All right. Okay. I want to ask you about Minsky then. Let's focus on that just for a little bit. So I'm trying to gather up enough courage to to download the program and open it up. And it partially is courage, but the other thing is, partially everybody's got a full plate sort of thing, right? But
yeah.
So I'm trying to understand if you're going to model something like a predator prey, and so you're talking about a diminishing food supply, right? And then okay, so that's the one. It's like a declining linear sort of.
I'll tell you what. Maybe this is actually one of those things where I should actually do it live on screen. What do you reckon? I
think that's great, because here's where my mindset is, and maybe you can kind of teach to two spaces here.
Yeah.
I have the matrix of basically like an Excel spreadsheet, which has famous intellectuals of our past, which basically are just. It's just an Excel sheet, and I wanted to see how that changed over time. So maybe you could talk about that just a little bit, because if I download Minsky and then I start to put data sets into the program, this might just be the impetus that kind of kicks.
Yeah, Minsky doesn't handle that right now. Of the package Ravel, which I'm despairing of ever having time or finances to get it fully developed. But Ravel sits on top of Minsky, and Ravel handles data. But at the moment, it only handles numerical data. So what you're trying to handle like people's names, text strings, and we have text strings as dimensions. So like you can have a text string which is scientists, okay, and then you could have individual scientists on that axis, but the data would have to be numbers, not their names. Okay, so that's a limitation.
Well, I want to question then. What if I gave each individual scientist, right, a unique number, starting with? That would work, right?
Sort of. I mean, there's still some, when you're going through developing software, I found a couple of bugs that make it, for some reason, not properly handle some particular data set that's just like that. I couldn't get it to import the data. I got nulls rather than the actual data coming up. You've got to make a unique key for each element, and then you aggregate along that key. And, trust me, we've got to do some extra work on that one. I wouldn't want to show it right now, but I could show the predator prey thing.
Yes, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, by all means.
Okay. Well, it's okay. So
And you're just whipping this up. You're just kind of doing it.
yeah, I can do it pretty rapidly. It's a very straightforward model to build, but at the same time, it's a pretty important model. So let's see. So select window or screen. I'll actually go for Minsky. It's sort of make it a bit smaller. You know how big my screen is, so things tend to disappear on that. So I'll just actually make it a bit smaller before I actually choose it. Hang on a sec.
I'm going to try and change something completely here on us here. Watch what happens. Watch what happens.
Okay. You've gone full screen.
Yeah. Okay. Just a minute. Just a minute. Let's see what happens here. We're going to get there.
Okay.
At least we have a themed frame, a themed background
There you go.
there, right? Okay.
Look, I'll actually share the whole screen because I've got to do a bit of logic, explain a bit of logic first of all. So entire screen, I'll allow that. That should still work. Okay. Are you seeing my whole screen here now?
Just a sec. I'll have to make it bigger here.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can make it bigger if you want to, or are you okay with?
Oh, no, it depends how much is visible. I'm just going to bring up another program here. Just to show. So if you want to think about what a percentage rate of change is, this is I'm just going to use math type up here. If you want to say if you want to know what percentage rate of change is, then it's a percentage rate of change is something is you divide say X is what you're looking at. Now, actually, I'll say fish. The rate of growth of fish in percentage terms is 1 over the number of fish multiplied by how fast the fish are changing. Okay, that's okay. So that's your basic equation. Now, what it means is when you want to express that as an equation in something like Minsky, then what you do is you simply have to multiply, rather than dividing by fish on one side, you multiply it by on the other. So you have the rate of growth of fish is going to be the growth rate. I was actually looking for a multiply sign here. Multiplied by how many fish there are, pardon me, hang on. Okay, so that's your basic equation. And so that's, if you imagine just having exponential growth going on in the population, that's your equation for it. So in Minsky, what you need
let me ask you just a very simple math thing. What you did is you flipped fish on the other side where growth rate is, and then the inverse 1 over fish became fish over 1, and then there's no more 1.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
So with Minsky, what you do is you create what's called an integral block, and I'll make it a bit bigger here. So that's this little thing up here. So I brought this down, and I'm going to rename that to fish. And we get a little window coming up, which appears way up on the top end of the screen. So I'll drag it over. Whoops. My mouse, I've got 2 mice, both of which are malfunctioning in different ways, and I swap between them. So if I say this is now the number of fish. So rather than this is the rate of change of fish, and I'll just actually show what's happening on the equation side here. You're saying the number of fish at time 0 is 0. The rate of change of fish with respect to time is also 0. So nothing's been defined so far. So what I can do with Minsky is say, just take a copy of that item. So here's fish, and I want to multiply that by growth rate, and I'll just actually make it slightly fancier because Minsky supports a bit of formatting capacity. So there's growth underscore rate, and I'll make that a parameter, which again, that's gone way up the top of the screen there. So I'll drag that back down over here, and I'll make that a parameter and give it a value. Let's say the fish double every year. That's a 100% rate of growth. So that's it. Puts 1 in there. I'll make it as much as say 200% minimum, 1%. I'll make it 10%. That's a bit too fine-grained with a step size of 1. Okay, and there's my growth rate. So I can now, if I simply multiply fish by the growth rate of fish, then there's my equation. But at the moment, well, how many fish do you start with? So I've got to have another parameter that I'll call fish at time 0, and I'll give that again the same. So we've got to change how we've got to make the window come up where you last used it rather than at the corner of the screen. But anyway, at the moment, I'll start with it. Let's say there's 100 fish. Give a maximum, say 1,000 if you want to try that much, and step size of 100. So now
Hey,
I've
Steve,
got this.
is a parameter basically just an initial condition? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Initial condition, yeah. So if I'll just actually make it quite simple. This is now saying this is the rate of growth of fish.
Yeah.
Is the growth rate times the number of fish that exists at the moment. And when I tell Minsky to recalculate that, there's 100 fish initially. The growth rate is 100%, so they'll double every year. So I now attach a graph to that, and just drag this down and attach a graph here.
How do you know it's a year right now? Looking at that.
Okay, that's the time constant for the system. So you determine the time constant yourself. Now I'm having a little bit of a hassle. I'm not sure where this is taking place. Let's see. So I'm trying to drag. This might be my mouse stuffing up. It should be letting me drag an arrow out of there, and it's not doing it. Just what I need to demonstrate the program. I'm going to try doing from over here. I know. Well, I'll try one more trick, and that is I'll take a copy of fish. Just when I need to show a bug when I'm trying to show off the programs. I'll take a copy of fish, paste it over here. Now, hopefully, there we go. Don't know why that was happening beforehand. Okay, so there's a number of fish. There's your equation. Hit the run, and what you get is exponential growth, the classic exponential growth. Okay.
Okay.
So that's like after 7 years, you can see how many fish you've got. You're talking in that. You're going from 100, they're doubling every year. So you go 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, blah, 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 which is just an exponential takeoff. Now, to make a predator prey system, by the way, if you're Canadian, you probably have foxes and lynxes or something like that, or lynxes and rabbits, okay? This is me being an Aussie, so I've got fish and sharks.
Well, why don't we do? But Steve, then why don't we do dingoes and babies then? If we're going to be like that.
Oh, whoa! Well, you better explain that joke to people who don't know the Australian history. Dingoes and babies. Well, that's cool. That's going to go down well. You've won the politically correct points card for the day. Okay. let me continue with fish and sharks. Okay. So here we have now. I bring down another integral block, and I wonder whether the math is fluctuating as much as it is. That's why there was something that might be causing that problem I had earlier. So I'll make this, this again, just so it's visible in the middle of the screen. I'll make this sharks, and I'll do exactly the same thing for sharks. So what you have is there's your sharks. So I take a copy of sharks, whack it over here, and then I'm going to have a death rate for sharks. And let's say that death rate, again, make that to a parameter. So let's say they die at 100% per year, and maximum 200%, minimum, very slow dying sharks, half a year, step size of 1/10 of a year. So that's my death rate parameter. And now if I multiply those two together, and then I've got to also create initial level of sharks. So again, I'll create sharks at times 0, and say there's
no death rate for fish.
Well, because what we're assuming is the fish are being born and dying all the time. But one assumption of the model is that they've got a limitless supply of food, which of course is not true. Okay, you generalize it and have the fish eating. What you'd get then is have fish eating seagrass and sharks eating fish. Okay, and that's actually what I might even mock that up as a sort of what would happen if an intelligent predator became the dominant species on the planet rather than us. That would be the sharks as the intelligent predator, the fish as the prey, and then the planet. The fish would be eating the grass, the seagrass, and that'd be the cycle you'd get. But I'll start with 1 fish and a maximum of 10 and a minimum of 1 and a step size of 1. There's a mathematical relationship that gives you how fast these things cycle. But I'm just making just diving in with these numbers. I'll start with that'll do. I'll just leave it like that. Again, take a copy of sharks and paste that over here, and then attach that to a graph.
I like how the instance of sharks, like even though there was a little bit of a blip and you could have drawn the arrow, I do like that, on your workspace, you can copy that one instance of sharks on the left or fish on the left at the top, and then use it in a graph way over on a different part of the canvas. That's really cool.
That's pretty much unique to Minsky as well, because most of the other programs require you to use wires everywhere. And we just that's of course what they call the spaghetti diagram effect in system dynamics programs. You've got wires going everywhere, and the wires, which are supposed to explain the logic, what's happening, actually get in the way of you reading the logic. So we tried to minimize that. So you can take a copy of a variable and place it anywhere. Now I made a mistake, by the way. I had a death rate of 1, but that's actually a growth rate. I've got to feed it through the bottom of a plus sign to make it minus, and therefore you get exponential decline at the 2. So I now simulate this. I get a rising number of fish and a falling number of sharks. So that's your basic logic in terms of 2 separate populations that don't interact with each other. But if you want to say what's going to go on, if you have a number of sharks as well, then what you're going to have is the growth rate is the simplest possible model is the growth rate is rather than going to be just a pure parameter of the growth rate, it's going to be some parameter again times how many sharks there are. So I can actually illustrate that in the pure simple mathematics of it. What I'm going to have is something like that. Okay.
Okay, let me just look at that a little bit. Okay. Growth rate. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll just put that inside brackets so it's more obvious that it's grouped together. Okay. So once you've done that, then when you expand that, and I'll just actually bring this down here, then you replace this bit here by that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So and then when let's come across. So what I've now got, rather than just the growth rate, I've now got to make space there. Hang on, I'll just drag again my mice being my mice and cats and sharks and fish. We've got a very okay. So I'm just going to delete that wire, and then I'm going to have a minus sign here, and so that's the positive, but you've also got the negative coming on from how many sharks there are. So I need a copy of sharks again. So I'll whack that up here, and then I've called that eat rate. Okay, so if I call that, let's say eaten. Okay, so I call that eaten as a new parameter, and I'll give that a value of, I don't know, this is what I'm going to stuff up because I all sort of forget what proportionality is. When I make it 0.03, a maximum of 1 and 0.01 and step size is 0.01.
But when you see the graph, you'll realize that you'll see the visualization, you'll say that's fairly accurate. Okay.
Well, that's too high. I've got to reduce the number, that sort of thing. Okay. So now what I'm going to multiply those two together, and that's then what's happening to the sharks, to the fish rather. So the growth rate, the more sharks there are, the slower the growth rate is. But of course, I've got to do the same sort of thing down here for the sharks themselves. And I've already got a plus element there. That's the plus there. So of course, they're going to get fed by how many fish there are. So
could we put in a limit on the unlimited food supply for the fish? Basically, like a variable. Well. We could do that as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is amazing.
I've made a mistake as well. I wasn't prepared for this, of course. I'm sort of winging it, but I've actually got to have the growth. It's not. It's this. This is where I've got to put that sign in there. So it's got to. There goes my light again. Technical hassles. Let's get rid of this. So I was just deleting bits and pieces. This is one of the advantages of Minsky. You can easily add and subtract pieces together. So this is going to be the growth rate minus. So that's your overall factor now. It's the growth rate minus how many sharks there are multiplied by that parameter from sharks. That's what you've modified up there.
Right.
That's my modified equation there. And a similar sort of thing for the sharks down here. I've got it's going to be the death rate. Hang on a second. Okay. Get rid of that line there. And it's going to be a death. I might actually just change. I've got the negative there as well. So it's going to be the death rate plus. I won't do this. So I might make it a minus. Let's say there's a negative of the death rate. I've got to multiply that by I'm getting a bit. I've got to go check the mathematics and see what I'm getting, because actually, if you just take a look at the equation, the rate of growth of fish is fish multiplied by the growth rate minus how many sharks times the eaten parameter. So the thing for sharks has to be sharks multiplied by minus the death rate plus sharks times eaten. So I need sharks multiplied on the outside there. So I'll go back over here. And so I want to have multiplied by sharks. And then I've got the death rate times sharks. Hang on, let's see.
Oh, this is really cool.
Okay, and sharks, and then I'll go for minus and try it that way. Minus fish. So where's fish again? And also I'll make this fed as the parameter for the shark. It's going to be fed by eating the fish, and I'll give this a value.
Tyrone thinks we should put moose in there.
Huh?
Tyrone thinks we should put moose in there.
Moose? Tough.
Yeah.
He's got to wait. He's got to do it himself. Okay. So I'm not certain how to set this all up. I'm just going to, again, go for crazy numbers here. You do have to rehearse this up before you do it properly. So there's feds times fish. So I multiply those two together. Let's see. Okay.
Fish.
And then have I stuffed this up? We're still going to find out. Is one of the beauties of it, Minsky, you can just suck it and see what happens. So it's that all model. It's actually times the death rate. Okay, let's see. And I think I've stuffed this up completely, actually. Let's just see. I'll just actually run it and see what the hell happens. Yep.
Oh, we went to a wall there.
Okay, well, what have I done wrong? Okay, so I've got sharks. Okay, so I've got death rate. I've got to swap them around. The sharks have got to be on the outside and the death rate on the inside. That's what I've done as a mistake there. So I want to just delete this and delete that. Bring this down here, multiplied by that. And probably, let's just see. You can see I'm just doing this totally muck around style, and we'll see what happens. And then up there, and then this lot, and drag this down. And now check that equation again. Okay, so I've got the rate of checks fish times fed minus death rate times sharks, and I think that's correct. Let's actually give it a simulation try again and see what happens. And I hit the reverse. That's a mistake. I just hit the wrong button up there. Oh, and I've stuffed up somehow. So I've got to check and see. I had a boom and a crash in the population. So I've done something to set that equation up wrong there. Let's go across and take a look. Fish times growth rate minus sharks times eaten. Probably the numbers are crazy in that situation. I've got too high a level of numbers. The lights are going on and off here as well. I'm trying to get this whole damn thing done, which is not exactly so helping. Death rate times sharks plus fish times fed. Okay, so potentially the numbers that I've set up wrongly, but what I'll do just to save my own ass here is load a predator prey model. So I'll actually go through and open file here and just go and search for, I'll search for fish. Let's see, hang on. Why is it actually taking forever to do this? Okay. So I'll search for fish.minsky. Fish and sharks. Okay, that'll do. Open it with Minsky. Right. And it actually, I didn't finish that one. Great. We're doing a demo for some students at some point. Okay, let's try another one. Go across and try. Fish, sharks, there we go. That's a more finished one. Okay, so now let's look at this on full screen. So this is properly similar sort of thing I did at live, but I was prepared for it. And then we simulate this, and what you get is cycles in the population. And this is a more complete model I'm showing. There's the equilibrium value.
Wow,
Notice
that's really cool.
Notice the equilibrium is where the system is never going to be. Okay, so this is one of the elements of complex systems. The equilibrium of a complex system is going to tell you where the system will never be. It's the far from equilibrium dynamics that dominate, and this is the first model anybody ever built. This is built in 1917, I think, by Locter or Volterra in Italy. And it just shows you get cycles out of a complex system.
Wow.
So let's just look at what I've got. I've done it properly over here. I've got fish multiplied by the growth rate minus eaten by time sharks. And over here I've got for the death rate of sharks, they've got minus the death rate in here, plus fish by feed on. So it would be the numbers I chose on the other side rather than the mathematics multiplied by sharks. So you check the equations and see what they are. And we don't at the moment have the ability to zoom in on those, unfortunately, but you can see the rate of change of fish is fish multiplied by the growth rate minus the eaten by factor times sharks, whereas the rate of change of sharks is sharks multiplied by fish by feeding on minus the death rate. And what you get out of that is cyclical behavior.
Wow. And so wait, I want to get that, make sure I understand that. So you're showing that it is an equilibrium. It is a complex system, but it's moving towards equilibrium, but it's an unstable equilibrium.
No, the equilibrium, with the actual mathematics of this is the equilibrium is neither an attractor nor a repeller. So when you define the equilibrium, you see it's actually quite simple. The equilibrium for the sharks depends upon the factors for fish, and the equilibrium for fish depends upon the factors for sharks. There's the two of them. I'll actually make it bring things together a bit so you can see them more easily. But there's your equilibrium of sharks. It's determined by the two parameters for the fish, and the equilibrium for fish is determined by the two parameters for the sharks. That's one of those cute little complex system things. You've got to look at the interactions, and in this particular case, the equilibrium doesn't depend upon what you say for the fish. For the sharks, it depends upon the sharks are determined by the fish, and the fish are determined by the sharks.
Okay.
But you need to do your mathematics and say, well, let's say you start at this point. Are you going to move towards the equilibrium, move away from it? And that actually depends upon the linear components of this model. So you've got to go through and linearize the model, which is a fairly straightforward exercise in mathematics. And then what you find is that because it's a linear system, it's defined by a matrix of numbers. You've got variables here, so you get rid of the variables and just have numbers. And the very first thing, when you look at the characteristic of that matrix, it doesn't have a solution in the real numbers. It only has a solution in complex numbers, which are square roots of -1, and that will give you cyclical behavior. It won't give you convergence to equilibrium. So you get a system which is neither an attractor nor a repeller, and therefore you have permanent cycles of that same scale all the way through. So that's, that's a bit of putting a model together in Minsky.
Yeah, so mention something about the parallel.
You just said the joy of live coding, dead right.
Yeah, that's right. So mention that, speak a little bit about the parallels between, now, if I don't know if I'm saying this right, but attractors in economics, or like how are, what are the main factors that are coming into simple models in economics?
Well, the simplest model is the Goodwin model.
Okay.
And that was built by a guy called Richard Goodwin, who's a lovely human being that I had a minor interaction with back when I did my PhD. So a bit of background. He's an artist. He was an artist and a Marxist and a mathematician, and he realized that he could never get a position in America. This is back in the McCarthyist days. So he taught in Europe and ended up actually teaching in the Italian system there. And he was trained, no, that's not right, Bijou. It is a complex system in the sense that it's a nonlinear interactions determine it. Strictly speaking, okay, complex systems mean you're talking about three dimensions or more. But fundamentally, it's a system which you can't reduce just to the linear components of it. So I've had this argument with what's his name, Tony out of Cambridge, our anti-mathematical non-orthodox economist. Can't think of Tony's last name. But yeah, it's the important thing is nonlinear interactions, and that's the rule. There's no such thing as linear. When you look in the real world, nothing's perfectly linear. Nothing can be. Otherwise, your desk would run from here to Alpha Centauri. Your desk chops off at a particular point. That itself is the nonlinearity. So linear systems are artificial. It's the nonlinear that's the real one. And what you've got here is the number of fish as determined by the number of fish minus the number of fish times the number of sharks. So you've got a quadratic turning up there as well, sort of quasi-quadratic. And the same for the sharks. The number of sharks determined by the number of sharks minus the number of fish times the number of sharks. Okay, so you get an inherent nonlinearity of that, and that's what gives you the cyclical behaviour. But back to this, what's the analogy in economics is actually the Goodwin model. Because what Goodwin was doing, he actually studied mathematical systems with a French specialist in predator-prey. And in doing it, he realized that what was shown in a predator-prey model was similar to what Marx actually argued in a verbal model he had in Volume 1 of Capital. So I think it's Volume 1, Chapter 25, Section 3. I'm not sure, it might be Section 1. So there's just like, in most of Capital Volume 1, Marx ignored cycles which might change the wage rate. He simply assumed the wage was subsistence. Okay? And that he actually, when you read him properly, and I think I'm probably the only person who's read Marx properly. I hate to say it, it sounds ludicrous and arrogant, but I've read enough of Marx and other Marxist scholars to be willing to stand by that statement. But Marx, actually one person, Alan Oakley, who read a brilliant history of Marx, he also realised this, as did, I can't think of his name, the guy who wrote Marx and cardboard card-out Marxists. Semantics. We should have you on that one day, Bijou, for a conversation. Join us on screen rather than sitting on the sidelines. That'd be good fun. What Marx said was in the first volume of Capital, he assumed that the wage was subsistence. And he then said, this will be relaxed in future iterations of my model, but I'm starting off by presuming the wage is subsistence. However, in this particular chapter of Volume 1 of Das Kapital, he starts speculating about what would happen if there's an increase in the wage rate. And he said, well, the increase in the wage rate would cut back on profits, which would mean less investment occurs. Therefore, there's less capital to both exploit the labour, but also to produce output. Come on, Bishop, come and join us. Come and join in. So what he argued was you get cycles out of it. And this is in volume, so rather than just everything being equilibrium and constant, here's a cyclical statement by Marx from Volume 1, Chapter 25 of Capital. And in being trained in the mathematics of predator-prey systems, I think with the mathematician was a guy called Wozniak. They're being trained by this, Goodwin realised the similarity and then realised he could actually put Marx's verbal model into mathematical form. And it also turns out when you look at Marx's own history after he wrote Capital, he was actually suffering very badly from carbuncles and various forms of stress. He'd had enough, and he spent most of his time in spas trying to treat his pain, but he equally was trying to teach himself mathematics. And what we believe he was trying to do was put this model in mathematical form himself, which he never managed to do. But if he'd done it, that would have been in 1867, 50 years before mathematicians themselves worked out how to do it. Anyway, so 1867, Marx writes publishes Volume 1 of Capital. 1917, pretty much, Locke and Volterra work out the mathematics of predator-prey systems. In 1967, so 1 century after Marx Capital, Goodwin realizes he can express Marx's model of a predator-prey system. Now, what I've realised, and I realised it's pretty much in 2017, so it's a nice little number sevens turning up everywhere, is you can actually derive Goodwin's model direct from macroeconomic definitions. So if you define the wages share of GDP as being wages divided by output, and the employment rate as employment divided by population, you can literally get to this predator-prey system that way, and you get that cyclical behaviour. So, hey, Vijay's here, so let him in, and I'll just bring up the other.
He can chat. He's just, because he doesn't have a camera, we probably just hear him. So,
okay, yeah, talk away. Vijay, are you there?
I can camera, but it's my laptop's below. Hi.
That's great.
I don't have room on top of my desk. It's got papers and everything.
You don't need the. We can hear you, so that's good.
Yeah.
Hi, Steve. It's great to talk to you live.
Yeah, very fun to actually. This is the nice thing about this live model here. So let's go bring up Goodwin. Actually, I have to open the subdirectory to find what I'm after. Goodwin complete. Let's take a look at that. Bloody lights going on and off on this damn house. Okay, so let's make this full scale. So this is actually Goodwin's model as a flow chart now, and you could do predator-prey as a sort of indirect flow chart as well. So here's wages minus output minus wages.
I don't
is
see
profits.
it.
Don't you stop hard? I've got to share it, haven't I? What am I doing? I thought I wasn't sharing. And I show share screen. Okay, so entire screen. Okay, entire screen. That's what's going on here. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay. So this is output, which is Y. I don't know where this came from using Y for output, but that's what economists have always done of all persuasions. Output minus wages is profits, which I'm using pi for. Goodwin simply assumed that all profits were invested, so gross investment is equal to profits. Subtract depreciation, which is the depreciation rate is the parameter times the amount of capital. The depreciation rate tends to be about 6%. That gives you actual investment. Integrate investment, you get the level of capital stock. Add that to existing capital, you've got new capital. Divide by capital output ratio, you get output. Divide that by labour productivity, you get how many workers you hire. Divide the number of workers by population, you get the employment rate. This is now a Phillips curve expression saying the rate of change of wages depends upon the gap between a level where workers don't insist on wage rises and one where they do. Integrate that, you've got the rate of change of wages, or multiply that, that's the rate of change of wages. Multiply it by the wage rate, integrate that, you've got the actual wage. Multiply that by labour, you get the wage bill, and then divide wage bill by output, and you've got the wages share. And so that's a causal sequence from one end to the other. And hit you simulate, and you get the same cyclical behaviour that you saw in the predator-prey model turning up in the Goodwin model.
Wow.
So.
Very cool, Steve.
So that's, I mean, I'm actually going to have to give some little, record some short videos on how to use Minsky, and I just haven't had time to record those yet. I won't get a chance to do them until after I finish the Y equals yield. Bijou's suggestion there. That's actually, that might be it. You could be right there. How did the letter Y become used for income? In fact, if you read people like Hicks, you'll find Hicks occasionally uses I for income. But the trouble is I also involves investment. So that's a problem. And no one's asking about Jerry Snyder. I do think I know the name. You must have to... earliest was collecting in 1937. Tyrone, you're probably right, because 35 was when Hicks was using I for income, and Koleski was an engineer getting involved, and obviously realised, well, you've got I and Y, or you've got I for income and I for investment. Yeah, let's use different terms. I can completely accept it would be in Koleski first said, let's use Y for GDP, for income, okay, gross domestic product. So Y and I is just two-letter Y for output and I for investment. Yeah, that's probably well spotted. Well spotted. So I hope I didn't totally scare you off there, Dan. It's not impossible to use the program. It's a bit of toing and froing, and you've got to get, what am I trying to express mathematically here? But it's really using a flow chart to do a causal relationship.
Yeah, I think the idea of intellectuals is the wrong. At least initially, what I got excited about was modeling ecological systems, actually.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole emergent, I guess, study from biologists and ethologists who study nature and populations in the wild. And I think that's so integral into establishing something like a stable biosphere, or with biodiversity. This is exciting.
That's actually, if I could take one step further backwards, this is just what I've done is a two-dimensional predator-prey system. You've only got one predator and one prey, and there's no evolution going on, obviously. But in the real world, there's multiple predators, multiple prey, and all eating each other or being eaten in different ways and so on, and evolution bringing new ones in as well. And in fact, Minsky is built on a foundation of a program called Ecolab, which was Russell Standish's PhD thesis. And that is actually a multi animal evolutionary model of predator-prey systems. And out of that, you get systems which can lead to stable ecospheres and other ones that collapse and so on. And that's the world in which we live. And the trouble is, we're a super predator. We eat all manner of prey. We ignore those. We actually drive to extinction the ones we ignore by taking over their territory. So in effect, we're eating the resources that they are eating by eating up the land they're living on. And we are, undermining the whole productive system. Now, if we were restricted just to eating a particular type of animal, which is, you can imagine the species evolving somewhere on another planet that just had one or two species that it consumed, and then those one or two species depended upon the whole web of life interactions, the rest of the rest of the population, then you might have had a sustainable system, because we would have realized very early on, hang on, we can't eat, we've got to make sure enough of the prey is there for us to survive, and we can't have the prey taking over the entire planet, so we have to have some sort of balance. So potentially, if we'd actually been more like cats, we might have been able to survive.
Yeah. Bijou, why don't you explain your comment about building a community? It's kind of interesting here.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I come from a very diverse background, all sorts of areas, physics and coding and all that. But I'm really into free Libre software, and that's why. I first found out about Steve from just having a side interest in chaotic dynamical systems and wanting to do something interesting beyond physics that's actually useful in the world, When I found out about the MMT crowd and Steve and all the others post-Keynesians, I kind of switched and thought that was a much better use of my life, really. But in the software community, you reuse code all the time.
Yeah.
Hardly want to create anything from scratch. Never reinvent the wheel. If you've got an idea that you need to code, you almost guarantee someone's already done it, unless you are very far out in the frontiers of cutting edge computer science. So you want to use Minsky, but you don't want to reinvent things yourself. You don't want to become the expert on it yourself. Build a community of people. It can be just 2 people or any number, right? And then you've got a crowd of people who can do things. Like, I'm sure Daniel's got lots of ideas he can put down in English, and he might take a year or more to code it, right? But someone else could do the coding in a week for him. So, and Steve's often, in isolation from the rest of the mainstream academic economics community, and he's doing a lot of stuff himself. And it could do with a lot of other people sort of helping out, but he's got And it's not force forged, right? It's free. It's free Libre software, free license, which means it's free to reuse, to share, to adapt. You could even branch it and do what you want with it yourself. Link it to other tools and whatever language you prefer to use. You could link it with Minsky some ways. And so there's a whole lot of stuff we can do if we cooperate. And I don't have all the great ideas because I've just come from physics, but
so here's a really good idea, I think, right? I mean, sometimes I just throw stuff on the wall and see what sticks, but I introduced something to Steve a while ago, which was E.O. Wilson, and I'm sure he'd heard of him, but he passed away within the year, and kind of the founding, or the father of biodiversity, half Earth, and this type of thing. And I believe there was a project he was involved with where they wiped an entire island of biodiversity, and they wanted to see how the biodiversity would actually come back. And it was very surprising that it came back fairly quickly. It first started to emerge with like spiders and these types of things started to build, and I think it was up to about 75% of the species were all came back, were restored. And so I was like, so as I'm watching this, I was thinking, I don't know how they've modeled it, right? I mean, I don't know how the biologists have actually modeled that, and it's in so this would be an excellent opportunity.
Did they do an experiment, or was it just a numerical model? What?
No, it was an actual physical experiment.
The writer George Monbiot, who writes for the Guardian.
Yeah.
That's a piece which I think was actually reintroducing coyotes into part of the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park. And I've got to bring my microphone far too far, bring it miles away from you over there. And by bringing the coyotes back in, the whole ecosystem flourished because the coyotes were the chief predator of the deer that had taken over the park, had eaten all the grass down, and then that gone. So when the deer population fell, then other smaller animals could fall back into that niche again. And you very rapidly evolved a more complex system by introducing a predator, not by taking a predator out, which is our normal attitude to how to improve things. And they ended up, so the predator actually improved the richness of the system.
That's right. And did you hear it was on the news here recently? They've got the genetics for the Tasmanian tiger. I reckon they can reintroduce
bring back the thylacine.
Surrogate mother down in Tasmania.
I mean, we're going to have to bring ourselves back one of these days, the way things are going.
Oh, don't be too nihilistic. The species diversity thing is really interesting, Daniel. That what you find is with these insects, a colony collapse disorder and so forth, it's not actually the current research is that it's not actually totally catastrophic because the insects can recover very rapidly. The larger organisms not so, right? So if humans we're gonna kill each other senselessly because we don't balance energy usage in the biosphere, then we could take a long time to recover. But if you just scale our metabolism down to the insect size, our recovery using the correct scaling law would be just as rapid as insects. It's just that to us, the insects recover very rapidly. So when you get a colony collapse disorder, it's a shock, but they do recover very quickly. So that seems to align with who was it? E.O. Wilson's research in that group.
I have this idea too of we're the species of one, but E.O. Wilson was the ant guy, right? He's the ant man, and a million species, I think, or no, it was like 10,000. I can't remember how many species of ants there were, but if you compare that, I mean, there's a biomass of ants are almost identical to the biomass on the planet on our planet of humans, and ants are about the same. And
bacteria are even more,
which has the most the strongest evolutionary advantage for survival, right? A species of one, or I don't know. It's pretty.
And on that front, I'll quote one of my favorite economists, Larry Summers, in explaining what he thought about ecological crises. He's talking about the value of biodiversity, says, in my answer, I give very little importance to biodiversity. I don't care about ants except for drugs. Well,
yeah, it's
ants are more likely to eat your corpse and vice versa, Larry. So, the ignorance of economists about the importance of a complex web of life in which we all live.
Yeah.
The other thing,
actually, sorry, if I could just interrupt for a second, Bijou.
Yeah.
One thing we wanted to do with Minsky is exactly what you're talking about, and that is create a library of tools. I want to see Larry eaten, not taken seriously. Is a library of tools. So, for example, an obvious one for economists is a Phillips curve. A function to represent workers' responses to unemployment, and we could easily make that like a little toolbox where somebody sat down and tinkered, and what are all the elements that determine workers' reactions to the employment rate of change of employment, inflation, et cetera, and just make that a little object which you can simply import and whack in your model. You don't need to code it yourself. Now, one of the reasons we haven't done that yet is, first of all, the size of the community, but secondly, also our grouping is pretty rough because we got persuaded by, I'll demonstrate on screen and show what's actually caused a problem for us. So hang on a second, I'll just do the entire screen, okay. Okay, so allow, okay. So if I wanted to group the section, which is just the curve, it's that bit there. And once I've now right-clicked, I can now say group, which makes a group out of it. And notice how the group visible, and you scale in and scale out, and that's really clever because what it means is you can actually go inside and, oops, I've got the whole lot selected, so I drag the whole lot around again. So that's not quite worked out the way I wanted it to, and this sort of, holy shit, I've stuffed up the model. Got in the way of using it properly, but I'm just going to go back and show the group again. So so we've got it there, but we've been too fancy. And normally other ones, other programs, you select a group and it becomes something which is locked, and you've got to open it up individually to actually see it. We tried to be clever, but we've been a bit too clever for our own good. It gave us too many mathematical scaling issues, and we haven't yet sorted them out properly.
So Bijou is talking about like something like a community where there's a free flow of models back and forth. Is that that's the idea?
Yeah.
And so can you clarify that, Steve? You're thinking that it's too no,
we can get there. We've already got we've got the starts to a repository. What Bijou is talking about is someplace you can go and find somebody's code, just drop it into your model, and that exists for all sorts of open source software projects right now. The idea, you can, and we could do the same thing with Minsky models as well, which we do want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've already done that. So when you get Minsky on SourceForge, Steve's got links to some of the mock-ups that he's done. All the ones that Lorenz Attractor, all sorts. Minsky with banking, the neoclassical, which sort of basically barter. So you can. Wow. He's already got stuff you can start with and tinker around with, and if you like for instance, I like to do my own coding because I've got other things that I want to do, but I can check it with Minsky as well. So it's just a great tool. It's a great tool you can do to check when you're doing ordinary differential equation modeling and that sort of thing.
What do you code in, by the way?
Oh, I usually use Python because I'm lazy.
Okay.
C++ is such a pain to debug these days, and I'm just doing rapid application development for research, not for production. And Python is great because you've got PyPy now, which is almost as fast as any compiled language. So I find it just extremely rapid development, and I can think about the ideas rather than the code.
Coding itself.
I recommend any beginner programmer should do a bit of Python. Once you understand it, you can integrate it with any other software you like through whatever interface, just a text file, communications or whatever. So I could run Minsky, grab the output, put it into some Python, and do something further that I want to do with it, whatever, whether it's empirical work or econometrics or whatever I like. I could build like 2 or 3 Minsky models, have them sort of run independently, but also link them together as well. But But what I find is that as a lone researcher, such slow progress.
Unfortunately, yeah, I'd love to have a group that I can fund, fund a bunch of researchers to come together and do the further development of Minsky as a tool itself, build the Minsky models as well, start sharing them, build a large-scale repository and make that a teaching and research tool. But again, all these things take time, and if I'm doing a silly little thing like running for election at the moment, I haven't got much time to build Minsky models.
Yeah, that's not so silly. It's a good idea. But don't worry, because you started the community, so it'll survive because it's non-proprietary. So. It's free, and people can reuse it and improve it and whatever. So it'll never, in a sense, it'll never die.
I think so. I want to make this live after I die. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And Minsky, Minsky is Ubernaut's asking, is Minsky an MMT extension of Keynesian? It's a modeling platform. So you're saying I did a pretty shitty job of it, but you can model ecological dynamics using Minsky. You can model weather systems using Minsky and so on. It's just a platform. But the thing which Minsky adds that no other program has is what we call the Godley table. And that lets you model financial dynamics, or as Tyrone Keynes has done. We've got two Tyrones clicking here in us. So Tyrone Keynes has done a model of the pandemic, which uses exclusive compartments like exposed, infected, recovered, using the Godley tables to build up all the interlinking differential equations. So that's a unique aspect of Minsky. And I have looked at Tom's models. Tom's a friend, but I haven't actually had a chance of putting any of his models into Minsky. One of the problems of putting post-Keynesian models into Minsky is most post-Keynesians use difference equations. They have t and t minus 1 and stuff like that. They don't actually understand differential equations. So I've got to look at their stuff and say, how can I convert this to differential equation before I can express it in Minsky? Because I deliberately have not made it possible for Minsky to handle difference equations, because I regard it as a primitive approach to modeling we should get rid of. And therefore, I do not support it and will not support it in Minsky.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, well, it's a time check because we're at the top of the hour here, Steve. That's the end of our time.
Okay.
Unless you make the call, is that it for tonight?
Oh, that's cool. I think I better get back and get into my election campaign. You would see I've actually created a new Twitter account today called Keen Senate.
Okay.
You'll probably, if you check your email from me, you'll see, or Twitter, you'll see I've said please sign up there. I'm looking for Aussies to sign up to that in the main, because I want to reach people who are interested in the Australian election. I think I've been overloading people with my general post-Keynesian economics with stuff just about Australia. So I'm created a separate Twitter account to stick to the Australian election alone, and I'll be pretty heavy on that for the next 11 weeks until the election occurs, and then we'll see what happens after.
Right on. Okay, you guys heard it here. Next week, same time, same place. Thanks again, Steve, for joining us. Bijou, thank you for joining us. And
next time, get your camera working.
That's a pleasure. Oh yeah, I'll have to reorganize my desktop.
And thanks everybody on the bar there. Sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but keep coming back.
He's asking what the address is. I've got to look it up. That's even not asking what the address is. Pardon me. I'll actually answer that question before we disappear anywhere. And the address is Keen Senate NSW. So Keen, KWN, Senate, NSW for the state of New South Wales. Okay. Bye all. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.